English 1C. I just finished going over your brainstorming questions, and I can tell that you need a little bit more explanation. So many of you, I returned the assignment and said, please do this again and resubmit, and I'll give you full credit. So you can do it as many times as you want and until you get full credit. So that's not a problem. Other people, I want you to consider doing more and to go through this video and really think about it, because that's how you're going to write a better rhetorical analysis. Okay, so here I am on the modules. I'm going to go to the brainstorming. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and I'm going to open up the file. And okay, so here are the questions, and I just want to explain a couple of them because I think that some people were really struggling. So the first one's what's the rhetorical situation? What occasion gives rise to this? Like, why is the person writing this? And so depending on the article, I always use letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King. He wrote the letter because he was put in jail at that time for marching, and he wrote the letter to other clergy. So it has a very specific time. The same thing with the abortion article that's on there, many of the other ones. So make sure you're really looking at the time. The historical context, I think that's pretty easy. Ethos. So when you're talking about ethos, you want to think of all the reasons that you would think this person is credible. So really think about it, right? With the knowledgeable and fair, most people did okay. Most people did well with the reputation. The intention, make sure you really fill this out though and think about it. You may even want to put some text, right? So where does it attack? Where does it exhort? Where does it dissuade? Where does it praise? Really think about it. Don't just go over these because you're actually writing your paper right now. This is the one that we need to go over the most. Who makes up the audience? I don't know if people kind of just skimmed the reading material before, and that's okay if you did. I mean, I understand we all ran out of time. But in the reading materials before this assignment, there was more explicit information about what an audience is. So when you think of intended audience, you first want to think about what is the source. So some of you were reading something from the New York Times. So not only is it a maybe general audience, it's also the readers of the New York Times, right? And so you want to think about what kind of reader is a reader of the New York Times, right? Is it a middle America, lower income person that's maybe doesn't have a college education? No, right? That's not who they target. And for better or worse, right, you can talk about how that is racist or classist, but that's how people sell newspapers, right? Or how that's how people put together something that they want to write, right? Who's the intended audience? So something like the New York Times would be basically more on the liberal side, right? More on the well-educated, more on, so the college educated. The readership is going to be slightly more diverse than maybe something like The Hill or something like that, or the Wall Street Journal, but it still is going to be pretty white, right? So that's kind of where you want to think about first, and then you want to think about the specific audience, right? Is this for women, men, general audience, etc.? Okay. Let's see. What values? This is really important. You may be repeating yourself, but go ahead and do it anyways. What kind of values does a New York Times reader have? They're going to be liberal, right? They're going to hold liberal values, right? They are going to value newspapers, right? Even today. The readers of the New York Times are usually going to be well educated. And so they're going to value education, right? So I really want you to think about what are some of those values. Some of you guys had a feminist response to Pop Culture magazine. And again, what would be the values of those readers, right? Their values are going to be something like feminism, right? Anti-toxic masculinity, anti-racist, probably. So think of all of those things that would be their values, okay? A lot of you guys kind of just skimmed over this, and I really want you to think about what is the main idea. If you could put this in 2 or 3 sentences, what would it look like? What are the principal lines of reasoning? Don't skip this, right? Go through and pick out actual lines from the text that are really key to the article, because you're going to use those in your rhetorical analysis paper later on, right? So these are all stages of the same paper. What topics of invention are employed? So what are the larger topics? So really think about it. Like, what are some of the larger topics? If you were doing the one on abortion, it would be maybe #MeToo, abortion, feminism, women's rights, human rights, intersectional feminism. Like, there's so many different things that are all being covered by that one article, right? Also, on that last one, how does the author or speaker appeal to reason and emotion? Be specific. The more work you do now, the less work you do later, okay? You can even copy and paste a lot of this into your outline later on. But give me an actual area. Here is a portion where they talk about pathos. Here is a portion where they talk about logos, okay? What is the structure? This is another area that people struggled. So the structure has more to do with the actual composition, like the way that it is organized or arranged. So for example, some of you did how 80s movies reflect rape culture. And so that particular one, she starts out with a story, then kind of an explanation, then I think she has the her argument later, and then some very small amount of evidence. So think about how they put it together. Did they start with an anecdote? Did they start with their argument? And does that work for the article? Does that persuade, right? The figures of speech, some of you guys did really well on this. Go ahead and just look it up. It's not something you really have to think too much about. But some of you did talk about synecdoche and schemes and tropes. There are a lot of tropes throughout them, so if you want to look it up, that's a good thing to do. But I understand if you kind of skip over it, we didn't go over it too much. What's the style and tone? Some of you are saying that the tone is casual when it's actually a little bit more formal, and some of you guys are saying it's formal when it's a little bit more casual. So again, think of the readership. Is this a scholarly article in JAMA, or is this an article in a pop culture feminist rant magazine, right? Let's see. What is the form, complement, content? That's all kind of the same thing. What effect could the form have, right? Does it help it or hinder it? And then here, does the message, speech, text succeed in fulfilling the author's speaker or intention? So for whom does it fill the intentions? When you're talking about the 80s rape culture, right, in movies, that very much is going to fulfill the intentions of the author for feminist readers, right? I tend to really like that argument, even though I don't think she does very well at composing the argument. I like the argument, and I'm much more likely to have confirmation bias and to go with her on it, even if it's not as well written as something else, right? So really do think about it. How does the author effectively fit his or her message into the circumstances, time, audience, etc.? Same thing, really just think about like, how are they writing to this time that they're writing in? How are they writing to the audience? Can you identify the responses of historical and contemporary audiences? That may or may not apply depending, but you can say the response, and what they mean is there a counter argument? Are they actually addressing the responses, right? How someone might respond to this? And also think about how people might respond. Think about how a contemporary audience might respond to the paper on abortion, right? If someone is extremely religious, right, or extremely conservative, they may not even look at the argument, right? They're going to say already that abortion's murder, bam. Although he does really try to write to that, right? He says that, there's going to be much less abortions if you provide birth control and other types of education. So, you guys should be for this. So that would be the response, right? One of the responses. How does the nature of the communication reveal about the culture it produced? So again, what kinds of values or customs would the people have that would produce this? So again, just because it's a little bit easier, the 80s pop culture, rape culture, what would be the values or the customs that this author, as well as the people that this is intended for, right? They're going to absolutely value consent, right? They're going to value a woman's choice. They're going to value, equality and egalitarianism. They're going to value, I think consent is just like really, really the big one. Anti-sexual harassment policies, that type of thing. And then, are there any allusions to historical references or time and location? There is sort of an allusion, right, in the 80s pop culture rape culture article. There is a little bit of that because she's very specifically referring to a time. But I don't think a lot of times this isn't going to be as pertinent. Okay, so I'm hoping that this helped. I'm sorry, I know that this was a really long video. Maybe you guys can watch it in a time and a half or something. I should probably say that at the beginning of the video. Let's see. With that, if you have any questions on your actual paper, let me know. I'll be happy to get back to you, and I'll see you online.